Our topic today is the Trump administration advocates for nuclear power. And with us, Ronald Stein, Oliver Hammers, and Steve Curtis. Please pause the video afterwards to see the incredible resumes of the three guests. And this is me, Armando Cavain, the moderator. I saw your article, people, and my first point is nuclear industry safety record seems pretty good. We know that. Very, very good. One of the best in the industry. So, isn't there a risk to remove or reduce regulation?
On regulations, I'll leave that up to Steve and Oliver.
Well, I'll take a crack at that. There's certainly a room for some level of regulation, but we are way too overboard on the nuclear power side of it. And my contention is that we already have a safety record established. When they first started nuclear power, maybe they had a case for trying to be very careful. But now that we've had 7 decades of running nuclear power reactors, and I say in my article, and I'll stand up to this, that nobody's been hurt in the normal operations of commercial power reactors in almost 7 decades. And I can say that because Chernobyl was not under normal operations when that thing, I won't say accident, it wasn't an accident, it was an incident when that happened to them. So why would we put so many onerous regulations on the safest industry in the world? And I nobody seems to be able to answer that. They all seem to be afraid of what they've been told and maybe instructed to listen to. So yeah, regulation is necessary, but not to the point that we're doing this now.
But Stephen, if you compare automotive industry or airplane industry with nuclear industry, the level of regulation are similar, or which one is
No, most of the other industries are allowed to operate under a standard. They set a standard of safety or environmental or whatever the standard is, and then the industry is allowed to go forward and produce units that are supposedly meet that standard. And if they don't, then they get in trouble. Like, automobiles have recalls every once in a while. Airplanes, once very, very seldomly, they crash. And they all try to investigate and find out what happened and improve the system. But with the nuclear power reactors, they won't let them even be produced until every little piece of it is approved. And now they're saying they even want to, the next step is that they want to even try to test every reactor in operation before it's allowed to go into service, which is extremely expensive and takes a long time. So we all fly in airplanes, don't think anything about it. And we all know that there are some injuries from flying in airplanes. Automobiles, 40,000 people a year in the United States die in automobile crashes. And yet people still feel that they should, that's okay to drive in automobiles. So I think it's a matter of perception that these people don't understand the right perspective that we have for nuclear, where the benefits are so high and the risks are so low. They've been shielded from that for a long time. So yeah, we need a little bit, but even if we had the level of commercial air travel or automobiles, we'd be very happy.
Not only for
Can I add to what
Sure.
Steve's saying?
Sure.
The world is hungry for affordable and reliable electricity. It's a lifeline out of poverty for people around the world. And what we're experiencing here in the United States, we can't get a permit, is the world is developing nuclear power around the world. So the United States will be falling behind nuclear technology if we continue this route of the National Regulatory Commission. They're just delaying everything. They just won't issue permits. But nuclear is being developed around the world, big ones as well as small nuclear reactors.
But Ronald, how do you compare regulatory systems for nuclear power from the United States compared to other countries, strong countries, I mean?
Oliver, you want to
compare?
take that one? That's comparing apples and oranges.
Well, yeah, Everybody has their standards, right? In globally, historically, the U.S. usually had the lead in setting standards, even for global nuclear deployment in other countries. So other countries were following the U.S. lead. Nevertheless, some countries go a little bit a different route, that they be less stringent in the application of the requirements. Zero risk tolerance is usually an approach to not get anything going, right? You're totally safe when you don't do anything. And the problem is that, as Ron said, we cannot have that approach if we want to have electricity that is affordable, clean, and highly in demand these days, right? You have a certain risk to anything you do. When you get out of bed every morning, you have a risk to stumble and break your neck, right? 300 people die every day from falling out of, every year, falling out of bed, right? So if you want to live risk-free, you stay in bed, right? And don't get out of it. So we have more casualties from people dying from getting out of bed than from the nuclear industry. And so, the approach is really, how stringent do you want to be in those regulations? And when you have a track record of 70 years of almost perfect operation, you don't want to kind of stymie that type of energy source that could improve the lives of so many people, right?
Oliver, does military nuclear submarines have the same level of regulation, or they have different rules?
Yeah, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was established after the military started using nuclear energy for their propulsion systems. And so they don't fall under this regulatory framework. It was created for the commercial nuclear deployment. Nevertheless, the military, with whatever requirements they put on their nuclear systems, has been doing a great job for 70 years without incident. They have operated their aircraft carriers, their nuclear submarines, and they were not required to follow the regulations from the NRC. Nevertheless, it was still a big success, right? So you technically, you would have to have, some standards, but not these onerous ones that the NRC imposes on the commercial side.
Yeah. Ronald,
another way of saying it, it's scary to have the NRC controlling the Navy.
It's a chaos. Ronald, is it an exaggeration to increase nuclear power in the United States from 20 to 80% of electricity generation by 2030? Is that a dream?
I think it's a reality. We have, data centers and artificial intelligence, the demand for electricity, robotics. I mean, it's all going up, 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 and it's not going down. And we're just not addressing it. We keep wanting to build wind and solar for electricity, and we're going to run out of land pretty soon to do that. So no, the electrical demands are going up, and the world recognizes this.
Yeah, but from 20 to 80?
On the quantity of electricity?
Yeah, it's in your article.
Yes. Steve, you want to elaborate on the growing demands?
My observation is we can do anything in America if we just allow the innovation and the engineering and the inventors to go and let the companies run what they have to do. What people are afraid of is that companies will try to make more profits and cut safety channels. And I'm sure, companies do that if they're not watched. But the nuclear industry, the nuclear power industry knows that one mistake will set them back decades. So it's very unlikely that they're going to take that route to where they're going to cut corners enough that they may have an accident, even an incident. And they've shown that over 70 years. So the point of holding their feet to the fire has to be, there has to be more behind it than just we're afraid of the safety. And we can talk about health physics and we can talk about nuclear engineering as much as you want to, but again, the track record speaks for itself. And even these new reactors coming out, the smaller modular reactors, they produce less energy per unit. So they're even safer than the light water reactors. Most of them work at atmospheric pressure, so that takes a lot of the danger points out of it. Yeah, you have to watch your safety. Yes, you got to know what you're doing. Yeah, there are chances for things to happen, but like everything else we do in life, it's risk versus benefit. And all you ever hear about is risk. Even the nuclear industry as such, when they talk about it, they always lead with risk. I don't understand that perspective. Every other organization in the world tries to sell their product by leading with benefits. And so the nuclear power industry needs to look at that. And we really don't have a nuclear power industry. We have utilities that own nuclear power plants. So that's one of the things I think we need to do is we need to have an organization that really does support the nuclear power industry in general, especially moving into the next generation. But the point is that they really stress the things behind it must be politically stressed, or you wouldn't have this issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I just would like to add something. When you look at a coal power plant in comparison to a nuclear power plant, the 95% of the operations of these power plants are identical. So the 5% that is a difference is a heat source. In coal plants, you burn coal. In nuclear power plants, you split atoms. Right? That is the difference, and how to gain the heat. Where does it come from? Right now, you can now look at the 5% and the environmental impact, and you will find that coal power plants create 10 times more nuclear waste than nuclear power plants, but the coal power plants blow it out the chimney, whereas the nuclear power plants store the spent nuclear fuel, or slightly used nuclear fuel, we should say, on site in concrete containers. So if you really have a problem with nuclear, the first thing you should do is get rid of coal power plants because they produce a lot more nuclear waste than nuclear energy, right? So and that's the 5% that is left. So effectively, really, the heat source is the main difference, and you want to look at that heat source. How clean is it? How safe is it? How good is it? How good can we handle it? And that's why nuclear power has been so successful for 70 years, because that 5% of the nuclear power plant that is in operation creates the heat is established as a very safe operation. Right, and it's with no accidents or hardly any accidents, maybe some incidents, but that's it.
Very
Armando,
interesting
you
comparison.
mentioned the 80%. That was Trump's executive order. He's trying to increase nuclear power to an 80% level by 2030. Now that's a tall order, without a doubt. But you have to understand that we put a man on the moon with a slide rule, and we got a lot more technology.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So good comparison. Very good. But Ronald, to construct a nuclear power station, you need 10 years. So we are in 2025. So how can we reach 2030 with 80% of energy?
Is it 10 years with the current permitting process?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Answer is yes.
Permitting take 8 years for permits. Yeah.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about NRC. What is NRC? How many people they have? Do they have? What they do exactly? And please explain.
Too many people to begin with.
Well, we can begin at the beginning. Back in the Atomic Energy Commission days, there was one agency that handled they were the ones that brought the nuclear bombs on board after the Manhattan Project. And then they went into nuclear energy as the government agency that controlled that. And they had both oversight and operations under their hat. And some people started thinking that you don't want the oversight in the same organization that you're trying to that promotes making these things happen. And so that's back in 1974. They split out the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's a bad name for it. It should be the nuclear allowance, the nuclear approval agency, or something like that. It shouldn't be the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That just means that you're there to stop everything, in my opinion. So they broke that out. DOE took the operational part of it, the promotional part of it, and the rest of it went to NRC. And interestingly enough, DOE was formed under Carter for one reason, and that was to make the United States energy independent. And so now they're coming up on their 50th anniversary, and we're still not energy independent. So if you got to look at how much benefit the people are getting from the operations that the government is dealing you. And like Oliver said, nuclear energy is so important to everybody. It's just a travesty that they're stopping that. But the NRC really is, like Oliver said, if you're a safety guy, the safest thing is to not do anything. And so when you have safety guys in industry, it's their job to advise what's the best way to get the closest to safety that you could get. Not that we'll just won't make cars anymore, then nobody will die on the highway. You know, that's not what safety people are in business for. But in the government, they seem to be able to stop everything. And we're just trying to make a point that if people want the benefits of nuclear power, which are tremendous, maybe they ought to look a little bit more at what their government's doing.
And is it the idea to eliminate this agency?
That would be my approach. I would look at it more from a perspective of well, like they do with automobiles. I mean, there's no automobile regulatory commission, you know, that does the same thing that the NRC does, or commercial airlines regulatory commission. These guys can put planes in the sky and get new routes and build new planes and build new cars any way they want to, as long as they don't violate the standards that are set. So why nuclear? Why does nuclear have this specific agency for that? It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's a good point. Is there a World Energy Agency for this matter?
Well, there's a World Energy Agency if they have nothing to do with regulation. Each country regulates their own stuff. Okay. So they could have a European system or a East European system or Asian system if they wanted to. Each country could set one up, but they don't. They traditionally, like Oliver said, have relied on what they call the gold standard of the NRC to drive them. But they're getting outside that box because they're putting reactors in, like Ronald said. So if they're permitting and licensing reactors and putting them in, mainly Russia and China, but also India and South Korea, then they're jumping away from the NRC concept because they're allowed to license them.
Oliver, the idea is to reduce coal production or keep coal production at the same level, only increase nuclear?
Well, there is, there are technologies now available to recycle the spent nuclear fuel that is piling up. There are new technologies coming online for smaller reactors that have more flexibility for deployment. There's, of course, still the traditional light water reactors available. So the industry feels encouraged, and the investors feel encouraged to create a diversity of nuclear systems for power production that could effectively address various needs of various sizes and locations and power demands. Like we said before, the artificial intelligence community requires massive amount of power for their data centers, for the computer chips just to run those and the tasks that comes with AI. But the power production is not there. And you cannot really address that with wind and solar because the sun doesn't shine at night, and you cannot, shut down your data centers at night when it's dark. So nuclear offers a clean alternative, right? And that's why I think there's a big push to get it going. The new data centers would require almost one power plant for themselves. And that's tremendous. That's when you say, okay, we have 300 gigawatts. The industries, meaning the Googles, the Amazons, Microsofts of the world, they plan to build 300 data centers for AI. And that means 300 gigawatts. That's how they come to the number. But they don't need the 300 gigawatts by 2030, but maybe within the next 20 years. Nevertheless, if you want to deploy more electric cars, you need to charge those, so you need power for that. So the electricity demand is going up, right? We had like a 20-year slow growth for electricity consumption. It's not really didn't go up that much, but the projected growth is much more accelerated, probably a factor 3 or 4 over the past years. And that's where the demand comes in, right? And so we have about 500 gigawatts production right now. They want to increase that to 800. And that's where kind of most of that needs to come from nuclear, right? That's really, in order to keep it clean and safe and reliable, that's the only option that the industry is looking at.
Armando, another way to look at this is we've got 6 ways to generate electricity. You got wind and solar, coal, natural gas, hydro, and nuclear. And of the 6 ways, nuclear is the only one that has the government involved in it. The other 5 don't have the government involved in it. It's like you say, in the rest of the world they don't get the government involved in it. So yeah, we know how efficient the government operates.
Ronald. Yeah, Stephen, Ronald, imagine that your name is Ronald Elon Stein, brother of Elon Musk, and you have $100 billion to invest. And you mentioned hydro, nuclear, coal, wind, solar, natural gas. How much money you put in each of these energy sources?
I devote it all to nuclear at this point in time. We've got more than enough wind and solar generating intermittent electricity, depending on great weather conditions. And you have to understand that 80% of this planet, there's 8 billion on this planet, and 80% are living on less than $10 a day. They can't afford to subsidize wind and solar. They need reliable, affordable electricity. And the least expensive electricity is nuclear. The safest electricity is nuclear. And that's the way they're going. But here in the United States, we're kind of stuck in getting permits because of the NRC.
Well, Armando, the big driver of the United States' success in industrial in its history is its free enterprise system. They allow inventors to go invent something, put them on the market. If people buy them, then they'll make a lot of money. If they don't, they won't make a lot of money. I never understood how the United States government felt compelled to get so involved in business that they try to manipulate the business so much. And that's not just with nuclear power. It's with everything. They tried to set standards in the last administration to where all you could build was electric cars. And so by using that power of the government, they restrict this choice of the people in a free enterprise system. Well, you all know if you have a monopoly, they can put any price they want onto it. And if you do that with electricity, people can't give up electricity. They'll just have to pay whatever the monopolistic system demands. And if you look at a utility, it is a monopolistic system. There are different types of utilities and different types of delivery companies, but you can only go to one place. If your house is in a certain area, you can only go to one place to get electricity service. And so the part of the marketing issue of this is to change that, because like Oliver said, you can put a gigawatt power reactor right next to a data center or a desalination center, and you can make all the water you want to, and you don't even have to go on the grid. You can just have that power directly transfer over and drive it. And that's horrifying to these utilities now. They like this system that they have where they're in control of everything. And if you start talking about nuclear power, look how many different cars are out there. You go drive in a parking lot, it's hard to find the same car that you have anywhere else in that parking lot. So people who buy cars have this amazing diversity of cars that are available to them for what their wants are. Bigger car, smaller car, less gas mileage, more gas mileage, can go a farther distance, can go around town, whatever they want. So if we don't open up this free enterprise system for nuclear power, then we're going to be getting one trick pony for everything. Every time you want to get nuclear power, you got to open up a gigawatt nuclear power reactor. So I say let the different companies compete and leave them alone.
But Stephen, this is not the United States of today. This is the United States of 3 decades ago.
Correct.
It's totally different. Today, we see from outside the United States, I'm in Brazil, that the state, the federal government is intervention every time, everything. By incenting cars, $7,500 per car, and influencing everything. So it's different. It's not just the United States from 3 decades ago.
Well, that's part of what the great part of the United States is. We, the citizens, are supposed to be able to have some influence. We're supposed to have some kind of control over what our government does, and we've seen the result of free enterprise. We've seen it it's coming up on 250 years now, and it really does work. But you have a faction in every country, Brazil, everywhere country has people who want to take over and control everything, make a lot of money, and control people. So that's the idea that you're fighting back and forth all the time. I don't think we have to tolerate it. I think we can come back into free enterprise for nuclear power. All we have to do is convince people that the benefits are so much more than the risks. And essentially, the risks are very little. The things they're talking about risks are, there's no way they can tie that to any kind of big problem that people are having, especially when you compare it to the automotive industry and we've deregulated industries before. We deregulated phone company back in the day, and we deregulated the airline industry back in the day, and that worked a lot to people's benefits. The prices went down, more seats became available, and people could exercise their right of choice on how they wanted to buy things. And there's no reason why we can't do that today with electricity. And if the two things come together, if nuclear power gets freed from the regulation and free enterprise starts working, first of all the data centers will buy nuclear power. That's all they want. They don't want coal, they don't want gas, they don't want wind and solar, they want nuclear power. That's why we're seeing such a resurgence right now. But can you imagine if they put even 25 data centers in and demanded that electricity? They're willing to pay all it takes to get the electricity. On the competitive market, they'll pay way over what we're used to paying for electricity now. So if they're competing for the same amount of power, imagine how much your bill could go up. I mean, there's some places, California is hitting 50, 60 cents a kilowatt hour on some times of the day. And that should be horrifying to people. But like Oliver said, if we consider the recycling, the spent fuel and fast reactors, we can be pennies a kilowatt hour easily once they get that industry going.
Yeah. Who is investing most in nuclear? Those who demand energy, or suppliers, independent suppliers that are pushing this energy consumption?
Well, from what I hear from the my camera slipped down. There we go. What I hear from the data center guys is they don't want to get into the nuclear business. They don't want to own a reactor, but they want to negotiate power purchase agreements from people who do own the reactor. That's what's causing this opening of Palisades, opening of 3 Mile Island, opening of Susquehanna. They're paying to get these reactors back open, but they want the exclusive rights to the power that come from them. And so they're going to drive the market because they're a big purchaser of power. They're, guy buys 100,000 cars a year, he's going to get what he wants. And so if you're going to buy this much electricity, you're going to kind of be able to say what you want to do. And that's what makes America great. They can supply what these people want. And so they're going to get it eventually, because those are the guys that are back there with the big money lobbying. So they're going to change the attitude of the congressman eventually. But our point is, why not do it now? Why not open up the market for, there's probably easy 50, 60 companies in the small probably more now, at least 50 or 60, that are actually viable privately capitalized startup companies that want to build small reactors. They just can't because they don't have a license. But they're still in business. They're still in business after a decade of forming to go into this business because the investors have confidence in it. Now, one thing they talk about is liability for reactors, liability insurance for reactors. But can you imagine an industry that didn't hurt anybody in 70 years? You can buy car insurance that's affordable, even though they kill 40,000 people a year, and then hundreds of thousands get injured. Nobody got hurt or injured in nuclear power reactions, and they're still talking about why the insurance is so expensive. So expensive because attorneys think they can sue, because if you have even just a rumor of radiation, they can build that into a case with absolutely no evidence at all that there is any damage. So we do have to start changing some of these perceptions, these perspectives that people have that form their perception, because insurance wouldn't be a problem. The cost would go way down on nuclear power, no matter which way you went, if you opened up a truly free market for it. But I think the coal guys and the natural gas guys are afraid, and the wind and solar companies, even though they say they're not, are desperately in need of subsidies because they're talking about taking out the subsidies for nuclear and solar and wind now, and they're saying, well, we'll be out of business then. So if you have an industry that needs that many subsidies, you're probably not a competitive industry. Those ideas need to be contemplated by people, not just the only talk is, what about radiation? How come the cost is so high? What about the accidents? That talk has passed. That talk is no longer useful anymore. And that's what our objective is to try to change that perception and look at the benefits versus the risk.
I think what
Ronald,
Steve is saying, we just have to get government out of business because they're just stymieing everything. You know, you take a look at the EV market. If the government regulated the EV market, there'd be no EV sold because of the fires that are coming out of the batteries or sinking ships coming across the ocean, and they're burning down buildings. We had a friend from Calgary, Canada, visit us in California. She lives in Pondo Complex in Calgary, and they have underground parking. But if you own an EV, you're not allowed to park the EV underground because of the potential fires. So if you got the government involved in regulating the EV market, that'd be stymied. Nothing would be going on.
There is a role for government. I'm not trying to say that there's no role for government. But in my mind, the role for government is to establish a level playing field for all people to compete. A fair level playing field so that you can't get like Rockefeller when he bought up all the oil supplies and tried to monopolize the market back in the turn of the 1900s. They saw that as not advantage to competition for the people, and they sort of changed how that business worked. So those sorts of government participation, just so that everybody has a level playing field to compete, is important. But they're trying to pick winners and losers in a market by using the regulations, and mostly they're bureaucrats that set these regulations. They aren't voted on in Congress, and so there's got to be some thought about how do we approach that differently.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's for Oliver or for Ronald. The finance groups, like similar to BlackRock and similar of them, how are they seeing these investments in nuclear? Are they participating in these investments, or they are only saying? And do they like regulation, or how do they think?
Well, regulation is one of those things that is increasing by itself. It is self-propelling. When you look at the European Union,
Very good.
The regulations and bureaucrats in the European Union is just so bad now that they cannot even make decisions anymore, right? Based on all that. So you don't want to never get to that point, right? You want to keep in mind that there is, as Steve said, a level playing field, but you don't want to over-regulate everything so you can't do anything, right? You literally stay in bed all day, right? To not do anything wrong, right? But the big guys, the investment guys, I think, as soon as they see that you can make money, and they don't really favor any systems. Yeah, they want clean energy. Let's say some of them might have green energy.
Exactly.
The definition of what's green energy and clean energy has been relaxed from even at the level of the United Nations and so on, that they say nuclear is acceptable for clean energy solution. And I think that's where investors go to, because investors, they don't really think like the government. They look more like the free market opportunities, right? And so the big guys don't want to stop that, right? They for their investors and their members and who put their money and faith in them, they want to make money, right? So I think once the government gets out of the way and lets the industry really operate in a level playing field, especially for the electric power industry, a big changes will come. Investors will be there to build new systems, less expensive systems, and the competition is effectively driving the prices. I mean, look at the cost for cell phones, right? I mean, making a call, even on the national level. I'm old enough to remember that there were times where you paid by minute $1 or something, right? And so now it's as many minutes for free as you want, right? That's where we want to get with the electricity market. You want to kind of create electricity at a cost that people might just pay a flat fee per month for whatever electricity they need, right? And that's the ultimate goal, right? To propel businesses and economies.
Ronald,
Armando,
sure.
summarizing what Oliver and Steve are talking about, the data centers are going to be built, but they're going to be built where there's power. And in California, we shut down the San Onofre. We're trying to shut down Diablo Canyon, so now we have 0 nuclear power plants. And data centers in California may not be the best location for a data center that needs a lot of electricity.
Ronald, the conclusion of this podcast today could be private investments without state or federal government, and the minimalist regulation, and killing NRC.
Yes. Great. Is that a technical concept?
We want to reduce the regulation to something that's comparable to the safety level that you're trying to regulate. I think I would say it that way.
Yeah.
If they want to have an NRC, they should have one that's more oriented towards how the rest of industry operates, not a special group for nuclear. Now, if you're in the coal business, or if you're in the natural gas business and you're producing electricity, you probably don't care much how much wind and solar they put in, because they know that'll never compete with their bottom line. But you are a little worried if nuclear comes in. So if you're heavily invested in one piece, it's to your advantage to get another industry heavily regulated. So we're saying that for the best benefit of the people, and that's what we really care about, where none of us think we'll make $1 billion off of this, but for the best advantage of the people, and as Ron cares really about the people in the world, can you imagine what a penny a kilowatt hour electricity could do for production throughout the world? It could lift a lot of people out of poverty, especially in third world countries. It could produce all the water you want. It could produce all the fuel you want for other things. It could give you a essentially basic life for almost nothing. And you'll see that there would be other inventions that come out of a penny kilowatt hour that aren't affordable now for it. Like you could charge cars right straight from the road if you wanted to by induction. It's not efficient now, but if you're getting a penny kilowatt hour electricity, you wouldn't even need the batteries. So there's a lot of those inventions that would come to the forefront if there were if you could count on extremely cheap power. And there's lots of energy around. As Oliver pointed out, we can get 270 years worth of the entire supply of energy just from the spent fuel. And they're making new spent fuel all the time. So the problem isn't energy. The problem is competition and free enterprise and innovation.
Stephen, what these people that work for regulatory systems gain being so deep in regulations?
Well, they get a job. I mean, they have I would probably get crucified for this, but the whole thing in DC is to try to get your own kingdom somewhere. You know, you want to work yourself up to a high rank and lots of people working for you. And I want to denigrate the NRC people. They're great people. All I want to do is see them working on. They're experts in this field of nuclear energy. I'd like to see them work on making nuclear power plants, not stopping nuclear power plants. So I don't want to denigrate the people of the NRC. They are great people, and they really, really are smart, and they're doing what they think is important work. But on a higher level, we need to look at civilization in general and what's best for everybody in the long run. And I just don't see that responsibility being well handled among the bureaucracies in the Washington area.
Yeah.
And the best way to work through that is working through private industry, especially startup and small businesses. And that's what the next generation reactor companies almost all are. The big guys all have their designs, but there's a lot of very viable reactors sitting around on just small businesses, startups, privately industrialized, and let them fight it out in the marketplace. They may all survive because there's a lot of different applications. If you want to put right now, the military bases want to put the reactors for a military base. You don't need a gigawatt reactor for a military base. You need 10 to 15 kilowatt or megawatts for a military base. Well, there's a lot of design companies out there that are working on that level, and they just haven't got approved yet, although the military is still moving forward. I'll tell you one thing about the militaries: they can do pretty much what they want to do in their own realm, as long as they do it with their own assets, with their own safety, and on their own property. So they can go fly all the jets they want to out in the Nellis training range in Nevada without having the FAA regulate them, because they're taking the responsibility. It's on their own. So they've seen this for 10 years now, a decade. They've seen the advantage of having small modular reactors, and they're pretty close to putting one. They're going to start one in Idaho, and there's one up in Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. It's supposed to be the first one. They're down selected to 2 companies. They're going forward with it. And maybe they'll drag the rest of us kick and spring them into the business like they did with the nuclear subs. I don't know. But that's the point is we really need to get back to doing business.
Yeah. Ronald, let's go to the conclusions. Please, can you please start with conclusions and recommendations? And Stephen, and finally, Oliver. Ronald.
Well, the recommendation I would have is, government does not function very well running businesses. And just got to get the government out of running a business, because there's no efficiencies at it at all. And they're just stymieing things and tripping over their own feet and delaying the permits. And I just see the world gaining nuclear technology advances and putting us behind the 8 ball. It's because of the increases of electricity going around the world and the need to bring people out of poverty. Yeah, electricity is needed everywhere. And in the United States, we're just stopping it with the NRC roadblock.
Good. Stephen?
Well, my perspective is that there's very little detriment to nuclear power. Yes, we have to know what we're doing. And yes, it could be dangerous if bad things happen and we don't have the safety functions we have, but we know we have the safety functions, and there hasn't been bad things happen. And we've started out from probably the riskiest type of reactor, and we're going to the even more safe reactors. And if you want clean energy, there's no cleaner energy than recycling spent fuel in a fast reactor, because that's already been processed from the ground. You don't even have to dig for any fuel anymore. And so the work we have to do, I think, is to get people to understand that they've been listening to some pretty far out fear factors that they've been listening to from competitors of the electricity business and proponents of monopolies. So the topic of the article is Trump administration is favoring nuclear. That statement alone is pretty significant. And I think it might start turning some eyes, but if we could just get, like Ron said, get the onerous regulation out of the way, the punitive regulation out of the way, the regulation that says you can't do nuclear no matter what, and if you still keep trying, we're going to just make more punitive regulations. That's the thing we have to stop. And I like I said, you'd see penny kilowatt hour electricity eventually if you let nuclear compete with everything else on a level playing field.
Thank you. And Oliver?
Yeah. Well, I think the executive orders that President Trump signed is a step in the right direction. Reducing regulation for an industry that has a potential to create trillions of dollars in wealth by through power production, recycling, spent fuel, and empowering new technologies that are coming online, like the artificial intelligence and related technologies that are mostly power driven. So my hope is that the industries get an effective level playing field where the power industries can operate in, provide the type of power that people are looking for at a very affordable price, and drive global prosperity.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I would like to thank you guys. I learn every time that Ronald bring our friends to here. Thank you, Ronald. And,
You're welcome.
it was a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great
Thanks a
day,
lot.
guys.
Great day for you too. Bye-bye.